Hi there, it's Simon Hurley and I'm a 14-year-old card maker. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to do an embossed resist ink blending on your card making techniques. This is really fun because you get a nice white image over top of a really colorful background. So let's get started. So to start off by doing all of the stamping for our card, we're going to be using the MISTI. This is a huge time saver when creating, and you can create multiple cards at once with these big backgrounds. You can also just use your acrylic blocks though. If you have those, it'll just take a little bit more time, but you can get everything nice and precise. So I'm going to start off by just laying this down in the center of the card. And then I'm going to pull images from the stamp set here. Now the reason why I have this in the center is so that things can kind of overlap off the edges without hitting the edge of the MISTI. So I'm just going to start off by pulling all the images I want off of here. You can use the solids and the lined images for this image that you're going to be creating today. So to space out these images, I'm going to move around the leaves and the flowers, and there's doubles of every image, so you're going to want to make sure that those are not next to each other as you're creating. And just line it up kind of like a puzzle, and put all the images down onto the piece of cardstock. And you can leave as much of a gap in between each image as you would like. I'm going to focus my images more towards the center of the card because we're going to be cutting off the edge in a little bit. So once you have it how you would like, you can move your MISTI down onto it and then just lift the lid back up, and you can add your magnets where there's little spaces in between. Now we're going to be stamping down our images with a clear sticky ink so that the embossing powder can stick to it later on. We're going to be using the Versamark pad today, and this is super nice to give a watermark on your cards, so it'll make it just a little bit darker in those areas, but you can also use it. It's a great ink for embossing as well. So I'm just going to ink this up. You won't really be able to see the ink much on the images, but it's definitely coating all of your stamps. And this is what the embossing powder will stick to. So once everything is inked up, all you have to do is turn it over and stamp it all down, giving it a really nice pressure on each one of the images to make sure that all the ink transfers over, because you want every piece of embossing powder to stick to this and for there to be no gaps. Now you're going to think you're done nothing because it's very hard to see on here, but the embossing ink is here. If you flip it a little bit, you can see it in the light, and that's what's going to hold all of our embossing powder onto the piece. So I'm going to bring in a little folded piece of paper to catch all the embossing powder that goes off. And we're going to use some white embossing powder today to resist all of the ink that we're going to put on. So just open it up and then dump it out onto the area where you've had your Versamark. Once everything's covered, you can just tap it off a little bit to make sure that there's no extra specks onto there. By using this folded piece of cardstock, it makes the cleanup super easy with the embossing powder. You just have to dump everything right back into the jar, and all that excess won't go to waste. Then to set this powder, we're just going to use our heat tool and heat it up. This is pretty awesome when it does it, and it gives it a really cool effect. You know that the embossing powder is ready when it kind of changes a different color, and it's pretty hard to see on the white cardstock, but you'll see that it just shines nicely in the light, and that's how you know that your embossing powder is done heating. Now I've chosen a couple colors today. I went with some pinks, purples, and blues. The reason why I chose these colors is because they all have kind of the same vibrancy to them and the same kind of saturation and color, so that nothing's going to really overpower the other colors. And also they blend really nicely together, from the pink to the purple and then the purple to the blue. And you guys can kind of choose your colors around this, with the warmer colors being the reds and yellows you can choose, or you can play around with the blues and purples. Just play around with whatever inks you have, and if it doesn't turn out, you can definitely just throw the piece away if you don't like how the results. So I'm going to just pull on a piece of spare cardstock for the ink blending. This is just so we can get a nice smooth effect as we're ink blending. So I'm going to start off with the lightest pink color here, and we're going to start off from the top. So get it nice and saturated with ink on your sponge, and then tap it off just a little bit so you don't get any harsh lines. And then you can start your ink blending off the sheet and then come right onto it. So just start your ink blending on the mat and then come right onto the piece of cardstock. This way you'll get a nice blended line and you won't have any really harsh effects. Now I'm just going to switch out the little sponge so we can move on to our next color. And we're going to be moving on to the Lilac Lane color. This is our second lightest color, and I'm just kind of fading to the darkest color at the bottom, so you'll have a nice blended effect at the end. So I'm going to start off the edge of the cardstock and come right onto it. This way you get a nice smooth blended effect, and you can blend right in between the colors. And you'll see that as you bring more color in and you layer it all up, the white embossing powder is resisting it the whole time, so you have a really nice white image over top of it. And if you feel like your next color was kind of overpowering the first one, you can always come back to it with the same sponge and just blend right onto it. That way you can get that nice smooth effect right in between there. Then I'm going to come right in with the purple plum as the next color. And just blend that color onto there. Then keeping that same color onto here, I'm going to go back into the Lilac Lane. So you still have some of that purple on here, and you're going to bring it into that color before it. That way it still has that nice and even blend. And if you feel like that first color is still being overpowered, you can come right back to that and darken it up just a little bit to match all the other colors. The nice part about this is you can keep coming back to all the different colors if you don't like how it's turning out, to try to darken it up and match it with the rest of the tones. Then to finish it off, I'm coming in with this nice blue color here. I'm going to finish off the ink blending. Starting off the page and then just blending right onto it. And I'm just going to bring that one color back in real quick to finish the whole thing off. And then we're just going to get a little water onto the image as well, just a tiny bit, to kind of wipe off some of the color that might have gotten onto the white embossing powder. So I'm going to trim off both of the sides so I can just have one portion going down lengthwise. And I'm going to cut off about 1/2 inch on both sides so I have a little bit of a white border going on both. Now that we have that portion cut, we're going to take some foam tape and add it onto the panel so that this can stand up and pop off the card. So I'm just grabbing a little bit of foam tape here. I'm going to rip it off. And then we're just going to place it onto the panel. This way we get some extra dimension. So just make sure it's nice and straight and then push it down to make sure it's in place. And then you have your panel on top of your card. And now we're just going to go on to die cutting the sentiment portion. So now we're moving on to die cutting our sentiment. I'm just going to use a piece of black cardstock, and we're going to cut out the sentiment Yippee from this waffle flower crafts die. And I'm just going to place my die cutting panel over there and run it right through the big shot. So once you've die cut out your sentiment that says Yippee, we're going to be adding this right onto the center of our card. To add on your sentiment die, all we're going to be doing is just running a little bit of tape runner right on the back of it, just the dot adhesive, and that makes it so you can just adhere it right down to your card. And then just press down to make sure it's in place. If you want for extra embellishment, you also could add some Wink of Stella shimmer right on top of the die cut, just to give it a little bit of extra shine and shimmer and make it stand out just a little bit off your card. Thanks so much for stopping by today to learn this fun emboss resist technique with these awesome colorful backgrounds. I hope you guys will try this technique at home as well. I would love to see your creations, and I hope to see you guys very soon for another card making class.